Hi everyone. Sorry I'm not there today, but my duties require me to be elsewhere today. So I'm going to just give you a quick rundown of some of the things that you need to be reminded of as we get into the next lesson. All right, so we're going to be dealing with, or let's first start with what we've been dealing with. So we've been working on uh, listing and going over just some characteristics of the North and the South and the differences, but not one thing we have not really focused on at all is how those differences led to conflicts, and that's what today's going to be all about. But we need to understand the context for some of these things, so that's what I'm going to do here. And these PDFs are attached on your Schoology assignment, so if you want to take a closer look at them, you can do that there. I'm just going to quickly go over them, or at least some of the more important details that you might not understand. All right, so first of all, if we remember from our assignments 2 weeks ago, we know that the North had a much larger population for various reasons, and politically, this was very significant. We already understand how that larger population affected the economy and other aspects of those two regions, but because we're dealing now with conflict and politics, especially, the population will play a role. If we go back way back to when the Constitution was made, they formed the House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, and the House of Representatives was based on population. So the larger the state's population, the more representatives they would have, thus, the more political power those states would have. So if it came, and because the North had a much larger population, if it came to a political vote, the North would, if they stuck together on those issues, the North would always win. Now, not all issues were sectional issues. Some were, they were all over the place. But once slavery started becoming a more and more divisive issue, then the population for sure played a role. However, when they created the legislature, the Senate, they gave equal representation to each state to satisfy the smaller states. And so, in order for a law to or anything to be passed as a law, it has to be approved in both the House of Representatives and the Senate. And so, if it just passes in one, then it doesn't go into effect. So, anyways, one of the things you're going to be reading about is keeping the balance between free and slave states. And so that's where the population uh, comes into comes into play there. And so keeping that balance between free and slave was really the only hope that Southern states had to not allow laws that would be unfavorable to the Southern economy or Southern culture. And so this is some of the stuff that we already worked on last week. So I'm going to just keep on going there. More on the economy. And again, we did all this 2 weeks ago. All right, so more there. And so then because the northern states had outlawed slavery in one way or another, only the South had slavery, and this was a major source of their labor. And so we know that their economy depended on agriculture, so thus their dependence on cheap labor. And this is what we worked on last week. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next one. And so now when we talk about slavery, if we go again way back to the 18th century, we know that at one point every colony had slaves, but as they started moving in a different direction, the North realized, yeah, we don't really need them. And so, yeah, you could argue that they took a moral stance, but it was also an economic stance. It wasn't vital to their economy. So, anyways, there were new states though that were coming into the union, and so if you look um, on page, forgive me, I don't have my book open, but I'm doing it now. So when you look at your map on page 404, you'll notice that there are there's the Mississippi River and the Ohio River uh, labeled there. Well, the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 applied to the territories above the Ohio River. And so these were all territories at the time. And so when they eventually became states, they decided they weren't going to allow slavery in those states. And so what eventually happened? Well, the states of Ohio, Illinois, Indiana all became free states. And all the states below the Ohio River, such as Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, Mississippi, and so on, were all slave states. So uh, it was pretty straightforward, right? The climate was ideal south of that river. Around the Ohio River, it was still okay, but again, they had a law, so they had to follow it. Simple as that. For the purpose of today. And so that Northwest Ordinance worked very well. Now, in that Constitution, or in the Constitution, there were also other things in there about. Well, actually, the Northwest Ordinance was not part of the Constitution, so I misspoke there. But in the Constitution, there were some references to slavery. So the Three-Fifths Compromise, we know that one, that had to do with counting slaves towards population for congressional representation. And also, we've talked about the international slave trade and how eventually the invention of the cotton gin made that a very interesting year. And so, again, this is just some review. Okay, so um, now slave codes, you're going to read a little bit about this, or some of you will, but you're all going to learn about the slave codes a little bit more in depth. And so just think of slave codes as laws that protected slave owners in case their slaves were rescued, I guess, or ran away. It's slaves were property, so they were entitled to protection. It's kind of like if somebody steals your bicycle and it's in their home, just because it's in somebody else's home, does that make it their property, or is it still yours, just stolen? Right? So I think we all understand in that situation that it's very clear. Well, same thing with slaves. If they ran away, they still belong to their owner. And so slave codes became necessary to protect slave owners, not slaves. And so what we're going to start going over is the conflicts that resulted from slavery. And so this is one of the issues that you're going to read about, as well as the Missouri Compromise. We already covered Indian removal and Mexico. And so we're not going to go over the Tariff of Abominations or Tariff of 1828 or the nullification crisis, but the Wilmot Proviso will be one of your terms, as well as these others here in some way. And so you want to record that in your Cornell notebook. And some of the questions that you're going to deal with today deal with these bullets here. So I'm not going to go over them now. I just wanted to go over the key things. Now, for your assignment today, you have the Google Slides, and what you're going to do, just a second. So you have this Google Slides here, and so these questions here will be assigned individually or to a pair of you, and you're going to record your answers here. And so, for example, if you have question 1, then you're going to record your answer here on question 2, or in this text box. Now, these parentheses, if I have anything, I don't have something in all of them, but if I have it in yours, then you can go ahead and delete that after you record your answer. It's just additional guidance to let you know what I'm looking for or what you should look for. Now, after all of you or most of you have recorded your information here, it might not be that helpful for everybody, especially if you record too much. I'm talking to you, Kristen. So one of the things that you want to do is you want to explain to the class what you're actually writing, and what each of you can do in your, maybe on a separate document, is just record your own notes on what the gist of what they're explaining is. And so again, some of you record sometimes too much information. And so if you explain, that'll hopefully help you trim some of that information down to just the key details. And we'll do this for all 10, and hopefully you'll have enough time to go through that, and then we'll kind of touch base on what you guys went over on Thursday. So if you guys have any questions on this, you can go ahead and send me a message or an email, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. All right, thanks.